Good day, everyone. I'm your host, Nicholas Haffter von Heide. On the International Euphonium Summit Series, we have really an amazing opportunity here, as just about every other broadcast and podcast. Got two guests, not just one today. Old college buddies, Dr. Ian Lester and Dr. James Long. One's at Sac State, and one's you're over in the Fountain City Brass Band area.
Yep, located in Kansas City, Missouri.
Okay, I didn't want to get that wrong because I know there's a lot of dynamics that go on in that whole area. So I didn't want to mispronounce or missay anything and give the wrong credit. But welcome to the stage, both of y'all on at the same time.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited.
You know, we are going over on the podcast talking about technical difficulties. So if you want to head over and listen to the podcast after this, find your favorite podcast listening station below or within the recording and go take a listen. We dive into the freshman days of Dr. James Long, right? You said freshman.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Being at the library.
Yeah. So just I used to work IT, and then you get to hear me have a ton of IT mishaps in the podcast. So the irony, maybe the generation gap has finally hit me. It's becoming a rude awakening with something so simple as Zoom, and especially after teaching on Zoom for so long, thinking I can't even operate it. It's pretty hilarious, I think.
That's funny. So let us know where y'all are at. I know we covered a lot of some really finite details of the football scheduling this semester at Sac State. Stingers up.
Stingers up.
Oh, you went that way. Is it this?
You can go anyway.
Oh, you can go anyway.
Right.
Okay. So yeah. Representing. Oh, I think your doggy wants to represent Stingers up too.
Yeah, he has his stinger up. His tail's wagging.
Oh, that's cool. That definitely qualifies as a stinger. And we were just talking about marches which have stingers on them. So that's really fascinating. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Thank you guys. So let's open it up and see what you guys have for your first studio memories under Dr. Kreshe.
Oh my!
You want to start, Dr. Long?
Yeah. I just remember when I first met Ian. I think he was visiting. I'm sure he has a better recollection, but I just remember seeing this kid with the most beautiful new standard Best in Euphonium. It was gorgeous. I mean, he took beautiful care of it. And then I think, my MO back then is if the horn wasn't dirty, I would rag on them for not practicing. Because that's what Chris Sarangoulis did to me when I played with the Army Field Band. He said my horn wasn't clean enough. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't dirty enough. I haven't been practicing. So, yeah, I mean, that was my first memory. And I think we played some duets. Ian was playing some Galliard, classic, and so that was
one.
Yeah, that was my first memory of Ian. And that was my sophomore year, I think, or end of my freshman year. Ian was still in high school, I think. But
Yeah, I have a similar recollection where I came and visited. I think I came in, I had a nickel-plated, really heavy Besson New Standard Euphonium, and played that all throughout high school. Then James immediately, ragged on me for it not being dirty enough. And me back then, taking everything so seriously, I was like, oh no, I got to practice more, make my horn dirtier. And speaking of Galliard, I remember my audition at Oakland University. I was so nervous, and it was in the band room. There were a few faculty, including Dr. Kreshe, listening to me. I got really bad dry mouth because I was so nervous, and I didn't have a pianist. So I'm playing Sonata number 1, basically by myself. My mouth gets so dry, notes start not coming out. And I put my horn down in the middle of this audition and asked if I could get some water, thinking there was a drinking fountain in the band room somewhere, because there was at my high school. And Dr. Kreshe goes, sure. And I look around. There's no drinking fountain. So I asked if I could go outside and find the nearest drinking fountain. And Dr. Kreshe, I think, walked me to it. came back in, played a little bit better. I thank him for accepting me into the program despite the horrendous audition. But yeah, when I visited OU, I think I sat in on the brass band or listened to it when I was visiting and was like blown away. That was my first exposure to any brass band, was that sit in listening to them. And yeah, it was pretty mind blowing. I knew I wanted to be in that group. And one of my other first memories is being thrown into the fire, not knowing treble clef at all. Dr. Kreshe threw me on first baritone. We played, what was it? Is that one Moonlight Suite or something? There's something called like Moonlight Suite, I think.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
familiar.
And I remember that piece. I mean, I could play it now easily, but I was so terrified at the time. I didn't know treble clef. But I learned it quickly. I think being thrown into the fire like that was a really good way for me to learn treble clef. But that James ragging on me for my horn being too clean and my audition are my first memories of OU. But it was a great time. So yeah.
So were you in that brass band?
Yeah, we
Yeah,
both
yeah.
were.
That at that time, yeah, I was solo youth
Yeah.
at that time, and then eventually Ian and I were youth partners when we won NABA. You know,
Oh,
which
that's
was
awesome.
so many great memories. I mean, that Euphonium studio in general, especially when Ian first came in, it was stacked. I mean, we had Dan Turchin, who's now the Euphonium instructor at the Army School of Music. We had another person who was like full ride assistantship at Bowling Green State University for their masters, and then Ian, me, and then another person named Jaleel, who was honestly one of the most talented people I've ever met at the Euphonium, for starting at like 16 years old, and how good he is. I mean, it's absolutely remarkable. So, I mean, it was just a great environment. And then you throw brass band music on top of that. It was just a rep, like it was an environment and challenge with the music, not just in your solo rep, but also sometimes your ensemble rep was harder than your solo rep. So you're just constantly being challenged and taking your you know your level to the, I mean, you're taking your playing to the next level. And then even on top of that, you're studying with a euphonium player who Rostropovich chose himself to solo with the National Symphony Orchestra, in Ken Kreshe. And it's just like, I mean, it was just an incredible environment to play euphonium,
Yeah.
especially at such a small, intimate, like school, where you get so much one-on-one attention. I mean, I wouldn't trade it for anything.
That's amazing. So how did you get to I think we do cover this in our first conversation. And how did you get to know about Oakland University?
Yeah, so when I was in high school, I wanted to take some lessons with um with a great player and teacher. So I had someone at my church growing up knew Phil Cinder, who's a tuba professor at Michigan State. And so I emailed Professor Cinder, and he set me up with his graduate student, euphonium graduate student, Robert Benton, who was an Oakland alum, Ken Kreshe student, and finished his DMA at Michigan like I did. Um, and so I studied with him when he was at Michigan State, and then I drove to Ann Arbor, studied with him for a couple of years at the University of Michigan. So for 4 years, I had Robert, and I really trusted him. And he's kind of the one who really pushed me towards Oakland and studying with Ken. So that is probably the biggest reason why I went there. I auditioned at a lot of schools um, and had a lot of choices, but I decided with like the financial package Oakland had, and then just trusting Robert, with my studies, I think it was just kind of a no-brainer, even though at the time the music department was still really under construction. I think Ian would agree. I mean, especially like all the other studios are now like catching up, and it's becoming a much more well-balanced school. And it's just it's great to witness and be a part of this school's growth. And yeah, I just love OU,
That's awesome. So what was your first studio together like? Like the studio recital?
Oh man.
That's way back.
Yeah, I don't even know if I really, one of the first things for me, I think this was before Ian got there. We did a euphonium quartet solo with brass band. That was like my
Wow.
first big studio, because at Oakland, like we didn't always do studio recitals because our studio was so small, and we had this recital series called Arts at Noon.
Hmm.
So every Tuesday at noon there was a recital, and pretty much there was always a tuba, euphonium, trombone player on it. So we were going to these recitals, so we kind of treated those as our studio recitals. Um, Now when I was teaching there, teaching tuba, we had studio recitals because there's no longer Arts at Noon. But
Oh,
when we were there,
gotcha.
yeah, we didn't do a lot of studio recitals because we just did Arts at Noon, and you could sign up and perform as much as you want.
Oh, that's cool. So, what was the first duet or ensemble that you two played in together?
I'm gonna jump in. I think my first memory with James was when we played Paganini Variations the year we won at NABA. I think that was 2013.
2013, yeah.
Yeah, I remember having a lot of sectionals with James, euphoniums and baritones, and there's some licks in there at the time where I was like, "Oh my God, I'm never gonna get this." And then, with just the diligence, James's help with him on solo youth, and just consistency, I think we really when we ended up performing it, I had it down for the most part. And yeah, James is a great leader. I just remember anytime I was sitting next to James, it was always super beneficial for me because I mean having that great sound right in your ear was awesome. He was a great leader too, still is. And
Oh, thank you.
yeah, he was just like super supportive because when I came to OU, I was not a strong player at first. You like as I said in the first interview, I started taking euphonium playing seriously only like between my junior and senior year when I went to that music camp that sort of switched me from going into medicine into music. And then when I got to OU, I was like high school level player. And then with James's help, Dr. Kreshe's help especially, I built up as a player pretty fast. And like James was saying, it was such a great environment to be in that studio. We had so many great players. It's like you could only go up in that studio.
That's amazing. What a great feel. So, what was it like playing? I'm assuming both of y'all. How large was the wind ensemble, or was it more focused brass band side?
Yeah, I think the wind ensemble they rehearsed more, and it was definitely like the premier large ensemble.
Okay.
You know, but however, when I started as a student there, and this shows how much the university's grown, our principal saxophone player was a non-major. Our first two flutes were non-majors. Like in all across the band, I mean, just non-majors dominated the ensemble. And now the opposite's the case. So it was like coming in to the wind band, just the level of the ensemble was less. But now I think the gap is closing just because the music school in general has just improved so much, which is great. I mean, for the university. And but what was great about Oakland, even though like the ensemble had some inexperience or people that weren't as practicing as much just due to the major, uh, the music director was incredible, Dr. Greg Cunningham, and he always found a way to feature the strengths of the band. So I mean, we did Roman Carnival Overture, the Marine Band version with that wicked hard euphonium part. We did Festive Overture. We did all the hard euphonium stuff you could imagine. And so that was a really cool thing, even though that some of the other sections in the band weren't necessarily as committed to developing musically just because it's a hobby for them. There were still plenty of opportunities for us to play the rep. I mean, I remember my first band audition. I had to play Pineapple Pole, a Aegean
Ooh.
Festive Overture, and Stars and Stripes Forever. And that was I mean, I was gifted coming in. Like I was a semifinalist of the iTech solo competition in high school. I knew a lot of, but that pushed me to the brink. And at Oakland, we do the auditions are weird. They kind of see how fast you can learn the music. So they only give you a week to prepare for the audition. So I was just over Labor Day weekend, just blasting at the cottage, my family's cottage, just really working on Aegean Festive Overture and Pineapple Pole.
Did you have to do the same audition rep?
Yeah. I think every year we had like Pineapple Pole, some Crazy Hard March, Aegean Festival Overture, something similar. I just remember my freshman year getting the packet, seeing Pineapple Pole and going, oh no. and then like trying to woodshed at my best, and so much fourth valve, and yeah, it was pretty insane for a young player, but like James said, it was that quick turnaround was pretty crazy. But yeah, that packet when I first saw it, like shocked me a little bit.
So I want to kind of dive into what was it like prepping for your championship season at NABA in 13?
Yeah, I guess I'll start. I think, like I said earlier, my biggest memory was how much work we put in as a section and a band into that music. Um, Again, like I said earlier, when I got Paganini Variations, I'm looking at it. I think this was my first year on youth. I was doing baritone before that. And I just remember thinking, even compared to the first baritone part from the previous year to all the other music we played, this was so much more involved on second youth. Ton of Divisi stuff, really euphonium heavy, if like anyone knows this piece by Philip Wilby. But yeah, we did a lot of sectionals, a lot of rehearsal and brass band. Dr. Kreshy, always finds a way to really work up the band, is really productive in rehearsals. And like to me, it just felt like that whole season we're growing and growing and growing. We're working our butts off, and it was really paying off. And I going into like the performance as they were walking onto stage, I had a really good feeling. I wasn't so experienced like with NAB and brass banding yet. They're like, I was like, oh, we're gonna win this. But I was confident in how we were gonna play.
That's cool. So prepping into this sitting second euphonium, and for those that if this is the first time listening in brass band literature, brass band world is as it usually is for those that are kind of new to the euphonium world. Euphoniums and baritones are kind of the premier of the band, so to speak. They're sitting in the front row to the director's right of the stage, and they're right there. And so they're probably
See it.
Oh, there you go. You have baritone.
And
Is
you can
you?
barely see it with the background, but I got both. Been working on both.
Oh, that's awesome. Is that because you're working on some just wanting to bring those out, or is that for because Fountain City Brass Band work out?
Well, I just wanted to show while you were talking about it the difference between the two. You couldn't see it very well with the background.
You want to turn the background off and then
yeah, give me one
Sure.
second.
And while
My
you're
room
doing
is
that,
sort of messy.
Let's
see. Let's try this. Will this work? Probably not, but
it's censored.
Okay,
Funny.
this is the best we're gonna get.
That's cool.
Baritone. So I'm playing baritone with Fountain City. Our season's just starting up, and I'm just working up some rep for Falcone and stuff. Now that I'm out of school, I have a lot more time to work on just whatever I want. So
which chair are you sitting at Fountain City this year?
I'm on second baritone. I think this is the first year I'm sort of considered a permanent member. We have Dr. Lee Harrelson, the founder of Fountain City, on principal euphonium. We have I think Dr. Steve Vaughn from I believe earlier Colorado Brass. He's on second youth. We have the great now Dr. Helen Harrelson on principal baritone. I'm on second baritone. So it's a great section to play in. Continuing the adventures of great sections to play in like I was at OU.
So that's interesting. Just to jump over, instead of Dr. James Long visiting Michigan on November 18th, because he's going to be at the UC Davis game probably.
Yep.
Is the NABA champion, the US Open, going to be live streamed this year? Do you know?
US Open. I'm not sure. I don't think Fountain City is
Michigan.
Is it in Clarkston, Michigan?
It sure is.
Cool.
I happen to know that because as I was watching the British Open, I was like, I wonder when the US Open is, and it happens to fall on my birthday this year. And it's one of the last football games for college football of the season before playoffs and before bowl games and such. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how the bands do this year, especially with how British Open just wrapped up their championship this past weekend.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was
what's really
watching that.
interesting. Oh, go. Yeah, sorry about that. What's interesting about U.S. Open too is it's different than the British Open. It's an entertainment contest.
Hmm.
So it's a
Entertainment.
completely, yeah. So it's more about like having a show. Imagine like a lightly staged indoor drum corps show where there's like a theme. You play, and you might have limited choreography, maybe an
Choreography.
announcer. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's not like marching choreography, but people will like move around different spots on stage,
Oh, okay.
do different setups. So it's more in the vein of the brass in concert. And US Open is in a different period in its history. Like now there's more rival entertainment competitions, I'm pretty sure,
Yeah.
in the US. And it's just a competition that's trying to rebuild itself to where it used to be. Um, but it seems like it's growing, and they'll have some good bands there for sure.
Absolutely. I think so. That's really cool. So what was your mindset and prep into that championship season in 13 for NABA?
Yeah, I think for me was just I think one thing I appreciate in my personal growth is delivery. Back then, I was a little brusque. So if I saw like a bunch of brass band people in the lounge, I would like yell at
Yep.
them to practice. Cause I'm like, you're wasting like, cause at the time, like most of that band that won were non-majors. Like, it was a completely different thing than it is today. And I mean, I would just call people out because they're like socializing, not doing their homework. And I'm like, we got to win. I treated it almost like football, in a way. And what I really appreciated about working with Ian was his consistency. And it wasn't like the playing was consistent, but it was like always being there, just always diligent, like wanting to get better. Like you get like Ian was someone to really rely upon, and just hearing his growth. I mean, there's a moment in the opening of Paganini Variations where we pass off lines, and I'm like, dang, Ian sounds just as good, if not better. I'm like, yeah, Ian's getting it, like there's especially, coming from Galliard, hacking
Hmm.
through Galliard to sounding like a killer on Paganini Variations. I mean, within a year, really year and a half. I mean, we just put in so much work. And I think, having played in a lot of Oakland's bands, and that was our most successful period was 13 to 15, 2015. And I just think the difference is it's hard because like student leaders are cornetist, Isaac Bainline, who was just such an incredible leader in how he got that section to play and elevate themselves. It was truly like a team effort. And those kind of leaders, like in the cornet section, they don't come across in a small university every day. We've had better players, but there hasn't been a better band because it's very interesting how sometimes like whenever you're in competition music, sometimes that teamwork and that effort could trump talent, ability. You know, that's always an interesting thing. And I think us as a band are naive, how naive we were helped too. You know, like we knew Paganini Variations was hard, but we didn't know that a first section band shouldn't be playing it. We brought that youthful energy to I think, and that exuberance, and Dr. Crushy, really channeled that into artistry, musicianship, consistency. And I think that's the hard thing to do with young musicians. And I mean, just looking back at those memories, I mean, there's a reason why our Paganini Variations recording has like 15,000 views or something, on YouTube. It's just it's not the best recording. Obviously, there's better recordings, but for a bunch of baby-faced undergrad majors and non-majors, I mean, it was definitely a highlight.
I'll definitely put the link to that video below on this cast. That'll be awesome for our audience to kind of picture that and get that background on that year, that performance. And that mindset going into that performance. Just
Yeah.
phenomenal.
And there's a lot of talent. Our solo tenor horn was the mellophone soloist for Blue Devils. And he was leading the tenor horn line. One of our solo cornets was a blue coat, and our rep piano player just finished his DMA at LSU in trumpet performance, Louisiana State. So there's a lot of talent sprinkled across that band. Our trombonist, went to top grad schools and have great jobs in and out of music. So just looking at that band, I mean, it had a lot of talent, but it was just a lot of diligence and every leader stepping up. And I think that's a tough thing, like in America, because like in America we're taught so much individual, like it's your bootstraps that you have to pull up. No one else can help you. But what I think I appreciate about that band, like I felt like it was truly a collective where everyone was there for each other and lifting each other up. Even though we could be harsh, and whenever I yelled at you in the lounge, it wasn't personal, even though I'm sure some people took it that way. But I think it was just a real collective mindset of everyone wanting to be there, everyone wanting to work for each other. And it was just a special concoction, I think.
So did both your families attend that championship run?
Ooh, I can't remember if that was one of the years my mom was able to attend. It might have been. I know my mom went to, I think, 1 or 2 of the years we went to NABA. But I can't remember if she was there that year.
Yeah, we won the Grand Rapids year. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure if my folks went, but I have the DVD back when they used to give you DVDs.
Oh yeah.
For man, I was gonna say, for those that don't know what a DVD is, it's kind of like a Blu-ray and it's kind of like a CD, but and it can be all played on a Xbox 360 or before. Man, really dating ourselves here.
I have the VHS of it, dude.
Oh
yeah. Man.
Yeah, I have the Betamax of our performance. Man. Do you have it on reel to reel?
I do.
I really want it on reel to reel.
Man, that's really awesome. How vintage of y'all. Okay, so what was it like going into the next season, following up after that championship?
Yeah, well, the next season was Butlin's, right, James?
Yep.
Yeah, we went through equally rigorous, preparation. So when we won the first section in NABA in 2013, that qualified us to compete at the Butlin's Mine Workers brass band competition in Butlin's, England. It was this honestly at that time of year, it's sort of bizarre because it's almost like an abandoned amusement park. Not abandoned, but it was off season, and they had this event there. It was really fun, but we worked hard. And I remember, I think the last band that went to Butlin's didn't place too well, so everyone there expected this other American band to do pretty poorly, and we actually ended up placing second place, only to Unite the Union brass band, which is a high first section band slash.
Yeah, they teeter-totter.
They teeter-totter. So in my mind, we basically won. But
yeah, I mean, the biggest issue with us, honestly, was the draw. We drew what, second?
Yep.
We drew second out of 20 bands. And Unite the Union was 13.
And I recollect it was cold. There was no warm-up room.
No.
Went backstage, went on, and we're up. And so I remember that panicked me a little bit, but I was like, okay, got to collect myself,
Yeah.
Yeah, and we ended up playing well. It was a really cool. The set piece was like some folk song, sweet.
It was a wind band arrangement, which was really interesting.
Scarborough Fair was one of the movies.
Yeah.
And then it was interesting. But yeah, we played well. It was very different in performance environment than it was at NABA, where it was like a bar almost, right? It was a big lounge area.
Yeah, it was kind of like an indoor theater, and they had bars and people were drinking beer,
talking,
and we threw down the gauntlet. That band was really great. I mean, I think that band, in America was a solid championship section band. But we went to England instead of NABA because funding, right? Like we can't send a band if we're going to England. We couldn't send a band to NABA. But yeah, that band was a really special band, and I mean, just such fond memories, just like flying over with all of your best friends. Because when you're doing this brass band thing, and like we were talking about all the sectionals, everyone is really close. and especially we were working on forming a music fraternity. So of course the fraternity was kind of a subsidiary of the brass band. So like every person in brass band was in the fraternity. So it was just like we were all really close, and just to take a week and just go overseas with all of your great friends. I mean, it was a great experience, and we played really well. And Unite the Union, I mean, they're always in and out of the championship section, because over there they have promotion relegation. And if you're a teeter totter band in Yorkshire, which is the most competitive region, if you're in the Northwest or in Wales, you're championship section year round. So over here, Unite the Union would be a championship section band. At least at the time. I'm not sure where they're at now, but yeah, at the time, I mean, they would have been a solid mid-table top 3 band in the US. I mean, they played the snot out of that test piece. And that's something that was cool too, is just hearing like 19 English bands play back to back to back. And it was just a great learning experience, because even at the first section level, it's kind of amateur in a way. You know, where at NABA, everyone wants to be like a professional. You know, over there, they just have cornet players picking up drums, and they might have one percussionist on a drum set playing all the percussion parts. You know, it's so different, you know, and it was just a really great experience.
That's crazy. So, man, going into England, did y'all watch the British Open by chance?
Yeah.
See the comments on how hot it was?
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah, everyone was sweltering and boiling in Buckingham, not Buckingham.
Is it Royal Albert?
No, that's I think it's Birmingham.
Yeah, I think so.
Anyway, it was roiling hot. Which would you two prefer? Hot or at the Butlins?
Butlins.
You'd rather cold?
Well,
Yeah,
I feel
cold
like
for
everyone's
sure.
half and half. Yeah, cold for sure. At UMKC there were some practice rooms that were like 90 degrees, and there'd be a few that were like 50 degrees for some reason. And I'd always go to the 50-degree ones, because like as long as your playing horn stays warm, and like, you know, I've never been one to be good at and be productive when I'm just boiling hot and, you know, sweating my butt off. So I definitely prefer cold.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and Butlins was probably only 50 degrees or so. It was like
Yeah, it wasn't too
52,
bad.
50. It wasn't like cold. The coldest gig I ever played were in the mountains of Austria, but I was just being a knucklehead.
The
Yeah.
Kansas City Tuba Christmas this past year was pretty bad. It was outdoors,
Oh
and it was like hours long, and it was freezing cold. I
man.
didn't know it was gonna be outdoors, so I didn't bring gloves. I had a light jacket.
Didn't
That was
y'all
it.
have like 150?
Yeah, so a few years ago we broke the Guinness World Record for
Yeah.
most. That was the one year I couldn't go. I had a final
Oh.
exam during that Tuba Christmas. But this year, yeah, we had a ton of people from, you know, wherever, and it was outside of our big Crown Center in downtown Kansas City. But I thought it was going to be inside somewhere, and didn't wear any gloves. And luckily found some like gardening gloves in the back of my car. So I'm wearing these like thin, like rubbery gardening gloves, playing my ice cold euphonium. It was a sight.
So what was the first Tuba Christmas you guys played together?
Did we ever do one together?
I've never gone to a Tuba Christmas.
Oh,
I've
man.
avoided it my whole career, because I know
Oh,
someday
man.
I'm going to be tasked to run Tuba Christmas.
Mhm.
And so, and I don't know. I've always avoided it. I don't know why. Maybe that will change. But yeah, I've never done it. Yeah, I've helped set up. I helped set up the Ann Arbor one once.
Honorable
but I
mention,
didn't
Dr.
go.
James Long.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
set
The
up
hat's
and left.
the cat's out of the bag, right? So
Oh, man.
Yeah, I went to a few. There was one in Detroit I went to, which was one of the like the big anniversaries of Tuba Christmas. I can't remember what number. I have the button somewhere in my room. But I remember that one was weird because our conductor was sort of this elderly guy, and he fell off the stage in the rehearsal.
Oh, man.
And like he was okay, but he had to be taken to the hospital for precautionary stuff. So I think someone in the audience just during our rehearsal said, "I can conduct." And it was this really nice woman, didn't know who she was, but she conducted everything. So it was strange. You know, that was a weird one. There was a Kansas City one. There were a few. Weren't there some at Oakland, James?
Yeah. Dr. Crusher used to host
Yeah.
a tuba Christmas.
Hmm. So I went
I
to a
don't know
few.
how I got out of those.
Yeah, I
I
was
mean,
gonna
I
say,
have
how are you
no.
not there?
I'm wondering how.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, maybe I was at one of them, but I never bought the stuff. So like
Yeah.
I think that's so maybe like my freshman year or something, I might have went to one of the Oakland ones, but I
Mhm.
never bought the stuff, so I don't think I've ever been because I would have had to have buy the music book
Yeah.
and and stuff. So I never did that. So I don't think I ever went.
Hmm.
Huh. I think that'll be a fascinating. Here's an idea. You know how I've been mentioning, December with the whole International Euphonium Summit when we're doing a live event, we can make it a tuba Christmas. And that'll be Dr. James Long's first tuba Christmas.
There we go.
And I'll
That'd
pay
be
for your book.
hilarious. Yeah, I mean that would be a great way to do my first tuba Christmas. I'm all in.
That sounds great. That sounds awesome. I like that idea a whole lot. Man, that's really cool. So, what was it like graduating and moving off to your next stage in life? Going to you, Dr. Long.
Um, yeah. So what's really interesting, I started teaching at Oakland University part time during my DMA.
Oh, okay.
So when I graduated, nothing really changed that much, except I had a little more time. I had more time to practice. I had more time to teach. Um, more time to help out with the brass band. So it was nothing like it felt like kind of like I was just biding my time until I got the job I currently had. So like I think right now I'm kind of going through like a lot of those, oh my gosh, life is changing, because since I was doing pretty much the same thing in my DMA that I was for the 2 years after my DMA, it was more of like the same, it was kind of like I was stuck, in the same spot, even though I finished school. Um, but yeah, now it's just um it's kind of wild. Time's moving really fast. Um it's exciting. I haven't felt like excitement like this since starting my DMA, right? When you go to a new school, like I think when you get like that like first like that big transition where you kind of like leave your educational coop, as an alumni of Oakland and someone, that's Oakland's taking care of me and help cultivate my career, it feels like I'm like it's almost like you're going to a new school. I would think that kind of excitement. The difference is I'm getting paid instead of paying, which is always nice too.
Right.
But yeah, so I think yeah, when I finished my DMA, it was just keeping more of the same, trying to gig more, teach as much as I can, build my CV until I get my full-time job, and that's the trick. So that's kind of how my post-grad life has gone. Music, unlike a lot of careers, it's not you graduate, you go into a job, your life changes. Sometimes it takes some time until you kind of settle into that, you know, uh, life. So maybe in 6 months or a year or two, I'll have a more enlightening answer.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Dr. Lester, what
Yeah.
was it like leaving Oakland?
Leaving Oakland, yeah. So I think we talked a little bit about this in the
We did.
first interview. I didn't know of UMKC before, like I was already applying for schools. And Dr. Crushy just was like, you should add UMKC to your list. They have a GTA spot open. I know you're looking for a GTA position, which I was. I didn't know who Tom Stein was at the time. Applied there, successfully auditioned, got the GTA spot. And, I had, you know, traveled a little bit outside of Michigan before that, but I was sort of, worried about moving away from home to another state, still in the Midwest, but, didn't know anyone going down there. I had no, unlike when I went to Oakland, I had a few friends from my high school who actually also went to Oakland, not for music, but like other majors, and I made friends quickly there. But I was just worried because I didn't know anyone going to UMKC. When I got there, one of the things we talked about in the first interview was I don't believe there's anyone better at getting good people into a euphonium tuba studio than Tom Stein. I was immediately welcomed. It was a really warm environment. I felt right away at home there. Um, it was, I think the playing levels between everyone was a little bit different. Like at Oakland, entire euphonium studio and tubas and trombones was like really high. At UMKC, there was a lot of variety. There were some, freshmen who were struggling like I was when I was a freshman. And there were some upperclassmen who were, almost as good as me, but like seniors and undergrad. It was sort of fluctuated. But I think the thing I remember most when I moved was going from being worried that it was going to be weird, no one was going to talk to me. I was really going to have to struggle to fit in, to like immediately feeling a sigh of relief, feeling like, okay, this is the right professor for me. The studio is awesome. I feel like I'll be challenged here, but I'll also thrive here. And the GTA position was really helpful because it was, co-teaching a non-major music appreciation class, which was a really progressive curriculum that the professor taught, where we just learned about like, 90s hip hop and like everything in between, and wasn't just, old European dude music. Um, so yeah, just when I started getting into the flow of things at UMKC, it was really quickly I felt at home. And now I just feel like I have two homes, Michigan and Kansas City. So that football game the other day, I was pretty torn between who I should root for, the Lions or the Chiefs. So I wore my Chiefs hat and Lions shirt and watched the game on TV and was like, I'll just say congratulations to whichever team wins.
Just say congratulations, period.
Yeah, I told all my KC friends, "Woo, go Lions," and they got so mad at me.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so going from championship NABA to England and then parting ways, like what was did that like brass band family at Oakland did you take that feeling and that energy beyond into your next like kind of station in life at down in Kansas, or where you went into next as an assistant?
Yeah, I think for sure for me, that like practicing consistently, the diligence and work ethic that I and the rest of the brass band built up during my undergrad studies, I really took that for the most part, I think, into my music making, and I tried to bring it to the studio at UMKC. I think, by that point, like we had talked about in the first interview, early undergrad, I had struggled academically. But during that time, that same time I was struggling academically, I was thriving in brass band because, there was help from James and from Dr. Kreshe. And it was such a unit, like a family unit and a team effort where, that was where I was thriving. And by the time I got to UMKC, I myself was self-motivated and more organized, and I took that help that I got from brass band and all the people in it and like was able to, self-motivate and use that for myself. So when I got to UMKC, um, you know, I I tried to bring that positive attitude and team effort into there. I think since it was such a great group already of just like nice, kind, supportive people in the whole conservatory at UMKC, but especially our studio, I didn't really have to do much to bring any more like, team effort kind of belief into there. It was already really set, which I think I attribute why it was such a smooth transition for me from going from Oakland to UMKC is because they're really similar mindsets. Both schools had a really supportive system of people. Um, so yeah, I feel like I just went from one place to another, smooth transition, it felt eerily similar in how just the vibe of everything was.
That's going to be really awesome when we go into dive into the second series for both of our artists here, Dr. James Long and Dr. Ian Lester, diving into the personal kind of bounds and limits and the work ethics and stuff like that in regards to the the championship season and your trip to Butlins and into the mine workers competition there, and getting those deeper dives into kind of your frameworks. And I think it really intrigues me, as being the one that's on this side of your set relationship that you've had as a section. Really, I didn't know really what to expect, because we've only covered small snippets beforehand, and then your interview, Dr. Long, that you and I were discussing, and we talked about Ian, and then threw that out there to do this, a combined interview, to get back into that section mindset and that family. And it's not just section, it's more the family aspect is really important. So how did that transition for you after Butlins and all those amazing seasons 13 through 15?
Yeah, so are you talking about while we're still in undergrad or after we left?
Well, I mean, we've covered I think with 13 through 15. I'm curious to know what Dr. Long's experience was post those championship running seasons.
Yeah. So after the 15 season, I graduated and left, and I went to the Cincinnati Conservatory. And the studio dynamic was a lot different. And I didn't necessarily, I wasn't always the best studio mate at times, but it was just because, I think the culture was so competitive. There was only, when I got there was only one undergrad. Everyone else was masters in DMA. And so you go from, this very familial environment to now I'm duking it out with a DMA euphonium player every week in excerpt class. And the more I win, the more awkward it could get. I mean, I'm just being honest,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
And so it was a breeding ground to win jobs. And that's kind of the thing that mattered most, it felt like. And so it was just a lot different. Now, on the flip side of that, we had a brass choir. But when I got there and I was really hands-on and helping and working on the brass choir, we only really played British brass band music. So when I got there, we did Year of the Dragon and On the Shoulders of Giants. That was my first year of my master's. And then my second year, we did the Symphony in Two Movements. And with one of my friends who's a Danish trumpet player who came over to study abroad and then went there to do his master's, Sven, he was a cornetist by trade in brass bands. So me and him kind of treated that as kind of our pet project. And so we kind of cultivated more of that collegial, less competitive, more just for fun atmosphere and that group. And that was a really fun group to play with and to scratch that brass band itch. I remember in my spring break, the year after I left, Sven and I took our spring break because it was the week before NABA. So it was the week before NABA was our spring break. And then we had the weekend, which was NABA. And then we went back to Cincinnati. So we drove up to OU. We rehearsed for a week. We played in the OU brass band for NABA and then came back to school. So I helped out. Ian was playing solo youth. And so I was playing solo baritone. And Sven was playing some back row cornet. Yeah, we flipped.
Yeah,
that's and it was cool. So much fun. We played Alchemist Journal, and that was such a fun piece. And then we played Philip Wilby's New Jerusalem, which is pretty much you just the baritone part was all 1, 2, and 3, or luckily I had a best in prestige, so I could shred with all the fourth valve technique. And I mean, it was just a blast. It was literally, we were just blowing our brains out, and then baritones and tenor horns would just go like this, and then we blow our brains out. It was such a fun week. And then that was a great year for OU brass band too. I mean, the band was so good.
That was 15, right?
That was 16.
16, okay.
Yeah, so that was the year after I left, but Oakland couldn't get rid of me. So I took our spring break and took one of my CCM buddies, and we slept on Ian's couch and floor for a week, rehearsing for NABA.
Oh, that's really awesome. So any cool stories that happened during that week outside of band rehearsal that you care to share?
Oh my
Was this for
gosh.
James or both of us?
Who's
Ian
first?
might remember stuff that I don't. So if you remember anything.
I can't remember too many crazy things about that week. I mean, it was a fun time. I remember Sven coming in. He made everything super fun. Trying to think. I can't think of anything specific that,
Yeah,
stood out
yeah.
to
I
me.
just remember sleeping on the floor.
Yeah.
That was like the biggest thing because I gave Sven the couch, because when I moved out with my roommate, Ian
Mhm.
took the same apartment,
Apartment.
So I felt like I had to treat Sven like a guest, since I used to live there. So I took the floor. And Sven was a great guy to have in brass band because he brought that like European, like just like spirit, like it was like a free spirit, super encouraging, just life of the party, huge
Mhm.
personality. It was just such a fun addition, and yeah, that was a great band, but that was kind of like the last band I would say that was like of that generation. I think that was kind of like the chapter closing.
Yeah.
Well, that's a fantastic way to even close out this segment with both of you and close out that chapter and we reunited that and really captured that spirit. I think it brought us along on that journey with y'all, and I really appreciate those sentiments and how important those years were to both of you. I'm curious, Ian, did you bring to Kansas that whole if your horn's not clean enough, you haven't practiced?
I did something similar. I think I actually told one of the freshmen the same thing when I got to UMKC. But he legitimately, this student did not practice enough, in my opinion, and you could tell. So I was like, I'm going to use the James tactic.
James
I, I,
tactic.
I looked over at this student. I'm like, horn's too clean. And he's like, what? I'm like, your horn's got to be dirtier, man. It means you're not practicing enough. And he's like, what? And so, but
Did
I
it?
think he started practicing more, wasn't cleaning his horn. He was oiling the valves, all the good stuff. But it actually seemed to help a little bit.
Fair
So the
enough.
James tactic works.
That's cool. Man, you should. I wonder what would the marching band students, even the baritone sections, idea listening to this, coming into next rehearsal and going, ah man, your horn's not clean. Your horn's too clean. You didn't practice?
Yeah, I mean they're lucky. They play lacquer horns, so it's hard to tell. Lacquer is hard to tell if it's dirty or not.
Well, perfect. It works for most situations.
Yeah.
That's fun. That's fun. Well, I'd like to thank you both again for coming on and doing this really special segment, rehashing championship runs and flying across the pond and just getting to let us know, about that smallish university up in Michigan, Oakland University. Again, I say not California. And getting to dive into your experiences, that it means a lot to me, and I hope it brings value to current and future euphoniumists throughout the globe, really. And it'd be interesting to hear if anybody was at that 2014 mine workers competition in England to see if what their take was on this brash US band that came in.
Yeah, we might have to find the Four Bars Rest article that talked
Yeah,
about it.
it's somewhere in the
Okay.
archives.
Uh,
Yeah.
so first one to find it, if we haven't posted it on this on the link below, feel free to post it below here and we'll attach it for other references. And I'm sure one of us could find it just as easy. But we'll see. And join us on the back as we recap this segment on our podcast. Find your favorite version below, and we'll talk to everybody soon enough. For Dr. James Long and Dr. Ian Lester, I'm Nicholas Haffter von Heide, and thank you for tuning in to the International Euphonium Summit Series special episode. Man, I can't wait to have more of these. This was a lot of fun, y'all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.